Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we are focused on giving hope and strength to the entire military community. Whether you're a veteran, active duty, guard, reserve, or a family member, this podcast will share inspirational stories and resources that are useful to you. I'm your host, Scott DeLucio, and now let's get on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Drive On podcast. Today, my guest is Mahesh Grossman. Mahesh is a somatic hypnotherapist who specializes in anxiety, depression, and pain management. He's the author of The 1 Minute Anxiety Solution and the creator of the Defy Trauma course, which features his 5-step trauma detox process. His unique approach to healing through hypnosis starts with connecting to and releasing the leftover emotional tension we hold in our body and using that as a tool to break free of bad habits like smoking and overeating, as well as overcoming anxiety and depression and managing pain. So welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the listeners who might not be familiar with you, other than what I just said about you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
So I became a hypnotherapist basically because I was already doing things like that in the past. I had a therapist I worked with on and off for 15 years who did this form of psychology called body-oriented psychodrama. It was based on something called Hakomi, which most people don't know, but it related the body to scenes. You would go back to scenes from your childhood and things like that by connecting to your body. And I was really good at it, partly because I had 300 hours of therapy with this guy. So it was like I had private lessons for 300 hours. And I was having results, and I was in a men's group, and people were telling me, my God, you're taking me deeper than I go with my own therapist. And I had a woman I helped get over her fear of needles. She was a diabetic, and she would cry 4 times a day when she pricked herself to test her blood, and 4 times a day when she gave herself shots. And in 10 minutes on the phone, I had taken her away. She got to the root cause of why she was having such an adverse reaction. And within a week, she was taking her shots without any problems. And she wound up being able to get off insulin. And she also lost 160 pounds. And she told me that was what I did with her was the start of her losing the 160 pounds as well. So I needed a shingle to hang my hat on. And there's a law in California that you're not allowed to deal with the subconscious unless you're a psychologist or a hypnotist. So I started looking into hypnosis, and I found that it was pretty amazing because there were techniques that I wound up being taught in hypnosis school that I already did. And when we did those techniques, putting someone into a more relaxed state beforehand, the results were absolutely, 10 times better. And I thought, well, this is really cool. And plus I learned all kinds of other things, obviously, besides what I already knew. And so that's how I became a hypnotist. And my practice is focused. I started off being focused on pain management, but I wound up healing my own anxiety, which cost me jobs and tens of thousands of dollars because there was so much stuff there underneath the surface. And anxiety and trauma are so interrelated that I do a lot of work with trauma. And I found that anxiety and trauma are also underneath pretty much everything. If you're smoking, you're trying to push down old childhood difficulties. If you're with pain management, it's really important too, because a lot of pain it's not so much a psychosomatic quality, but it's like if you have old trauma and you're carrying it still in your body, well, that's impacting the tension in your muscles, which is impacting your blood flow. And for pain management, it's a really important thing to do.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's one of those things that will help out in many different levels of pain that you might be experiencing. It could be physical pain, it could be emotional pain, it could be all sorts of different things that you might be having. But this type of thing um, just seems like it can help in a lot of different areas. Would you be able to describe exactly like what hypnosis is? Because I know for me personally, when I hear the term hypnosis, I think about the TV shows where you see the people walking around clucking like chickens and that kind of thing. But that's not really what it is that you're talking about here. What is it that you're talking about, and how does that work?
Well, here's the thing to know. It's an incredibly normal state. So if you're somebody who goes to the movies and you like, crying at movies, you're not crying at real life. You're being hypnotized into believing, oh my God, something really bad happened to the leading character. And now I'm sad. And it's like, boo hoo hoo. You've been hypnotized. It's even weirder with books, right? Novels. There's this black and white stuff on a page. And the book says she saw a gray rock castle with a cherry red door. And a lot of people who love novels see that gray rock castle with a cherry red door. Guess what? That was black and white stuff on black stuff on paper. There is no castle, there is no door. And if you went to a hypnotherapist, you'd get the same results. I would just say, picture a gray rock castle with a cherry red door. So hypnosis is an extraordinarily common state. And, and also, like, if you ever got lost in a video game or a book and somebody's calling your name and you're not answering because you don't hear them, that's hypnosis, right? It's a state of complete concentration. So typically I work differently than most hypnotherapists. Sometimes I do the same thing, but so I'm an empath, which means I feel what's going on in other people's bodies. And this thing happens when I sit with somebody on Zoom, where I notice tension in my body that wasn't there before the session started. And so sometimes it's so strong that I just have to start that way, and even may mention it. Usually I'll ask them to say, hey, notice where you feel tension in your body right now. And typically it's either in their chest or their belly, or those two main places for emotional stuff. And we start from there. And then the very simple next sentence is, notice how old you were the first time you had that sensation in your body. Where were you? What was happening? And that's how we get to kind of childhood stuff. With things like smoking and stuff like that, we do something, we'll do more visualization stuff. But still, it's like, let's think about the first time you had a cigarette and what did you want? So those are the kinds of things that hypnosis does. And it works to heal in such profound ways, because if you can get to the difficult things that happened in the past, they're gone, they're over with, but they're still in your body. So we're going to release the tension that's left over in your body. And we're going to change the story of what happened. And because let's say your dad was incredibly critical of you when you were 4 years old. Well, that is gone. Your dad has had numerous right? The cells change over every 7 or 9 years. So like your dad has had 4 different bodies, something, since that happened. But it's inside you. It's your inner dad that we're working with. And that inner dad is a part of you that doesn't love yourself unconditionally. And that's maintaining kind of a hypnotic trance over you that you need to break.
What about in cases where stuff has just been pushed back so far and it's been so long, it could be decades ago that something like this has happened, and maybe the person just doesn't quite remember it. Is there a way to bring those memories back up to the surface to
we
kind
do
of work on those? Or
that's where the body comes in. There's this book by Bessel van der Kolk called The Body Keeps the Score, which is all about body-oriented psychology and 17 different approaches to it. And the truth is, you can find out. So, I mean, it has to go in a certain order, and the time has to be right. And but if you're coming to see somebody, or if you've got the desire or the impulse to come and see somebody, that's usually right. I mean, I've also had the opposite experience in my own life where my ex-wife would talk about being molested by her father over 12 years. And every time she'd talk about her father, I'd see my grandfather's face. And my grandfather and my father-in-law looked nothing alike. And I kept saying, did my grandfather molest me? And I kept getting a no. And then one day I got a yes. And all this emotion came with it, and it was time, but it wasn't time yet. But in terms of coming in with, getting memories, this body scan thing, when you sit there and go and you notice tension, say in your solar plexus, which is the midriff, or between the belly and the chest, there's some reason it's there. And so when you ask yourself, how old was I the first time I had that sensation in my body? A lot of times you'll get an answer. If you don't get an answer, I just, I start splitting the difference. Well, were you below 10 or below, or 10 or above? And, if you say 10 or above, I'll say, well, were you 10 to 20 or 20 or over? And
Right.
eventually something shows up. And I teach all these things. I teach this entire 5-step trauma detox process in my Defy Trauma course, which I'll tell you people how to get to later on. But it's a really specific thing. And it's so important to me, I think, because when you get triggered also, right? So say somebody does something and you're really upset. It's not really about what they did. It's that they're bumping against a really bruised place inside you. So you can also go, wow, I'm really upset. Where do I feel that upset in my body? And how old was I when I had that sensation for the first time?
That's interesting to think about it that way, and kind of walk your steps back to try to figure out when that time frame was, and try to narrow it down that way. Because I know there's some people who listen to this podcast, especially in the military and the veteran communities. They can probably sometimes pinpoint something very specific, combat related type thing that might be a traumatic incident, and they could say, yes, on April whatever of whatever year, that this event happened, and this is a thing that's really been keeping me up at night, giving me the anxiety and the panic attacks and all that kind of stuff. But there may have also been other things in their past, in their childhood, that could also be creeping up, and they may not even realize it because they're just focusing on that one more recent trauma event, and not thinking about the things that had happened years and years ago. So it could actually be a combination, right?
Well, the pain from the present affects the pain in the past affects that pain. So I've worked with people who've sadly been raped, and some of what the pain wasn't the pain of the rape, but that exacerbated something else that was really hard. And so you heal from both of those places.
Right.
So yeah, and so I'm wondering what kind of, I haven't worked specifically with, I worked with a lot of PTSD, but not from combat. But I'm assuming that the same kinds of techniques that I do for PTSD from childhood trauma work for combat too.
I'm sure that a lot of it, I mean, there may be some differences here and there. I don't know specifically, but I'm sure a lot of it is the same, because, you're talking about one traumatic event versus another. They're traumatic no matter what, no matter where you happen to be, whether you were, on roadside in Iraq, or if you were in the comfort of your own home, they're traumatic nonetheless. So,
Right.
I think there's probably some overlap there in terms of the treatment and how all of that type of stuff works.
Yeah. Well, I think that, go ahead. Sorry.
But I think the next thought that I had was kind of just wondering if this is something that could work for just about anyone, because I would imagine that there's some people who might be somewhat more resistant to this type of treatment, where they're too wound up and they can't get in that kind of relaxed state that it requires for this type of thing to work. Or maybe I'm wrong with that. Maybe that it's something that everyone can work with.
Nothing works for everybody.
Sure.
Nothing works for everybody. My best clients, I mean, the people I work with that go the farthest, the easiest, are people who've already done a bunch of therapy. What I do is kind of like post-doc work for people who've done therapy. I've had clients, one client tell me that 4 sessions with me was better than 20 years of psychoanalysis that he'd done before. But you don't have to. I've had other clients where they had no experience, but you have to be willing to see that life was bad and life was difficult. You have to be willing to know that some bad things happen to you. I mean, I can, and yet you just have to be motivated enough on a certain level, and it helps you don't have to be visual, although visual is a nice thing. But there's what happens is you get if I say see a gray rock castle with a cherry red door, and you can sense it being there, but you can't really see it, that's okay. Or if you can hear, like I used to be more auditory. I remember seeing the movie, it was a John Grisham novel, and all I did was hear Whoopi Goldberg's voice the whole novel. Then I went to see the movie, and it was Susan Sarandon. And it took me half an hour before I could let Susan Sarandon be the character. So some people have that kind of auditory experience. But yeah, that's
so it's not for everyone, but it's something that certain people it will resonate with, right?
Yeah, I'd say about 60-70%. I mean, pain management gets about a 75% success rate nationwide, and this is not real hypnotherapy, right? This is standardized for science, so you say exactly the same thing to everybody so that it's measurable, which is not particularly good hypnosis. You want to customize it to the person you're dealing with. And we see the same kind of results with something like irritable bowel syndrome. It's a 75% success rate. With anxiety, there's studies, huge results for people who are in the hospital facing surgery, or after they've had a heart attack or something like that. So there are a lot of statistics that say it works really well, but I wouldn't trust anything that anybody said worked for everybody.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I totally agree with that, because everybody's different. Their minds, their experiences, everything that they've gone through is different. And so to say that there's a one size fits all solution, that would probably set off a few red flags for me. But you're talking about some of the different types of things that hypnosis is used for to deal with. And I know there's a lot of physical and emotional type things that people have used hypnosis for. But I also know that there's probably a lot of the listeners, especially the veterans out there, who are being medicated to treat a number of different physical issues like back and joint pain and things like that. And as well as emotional issues, the anxiety, depression, PTSD, insomnia, even things like that. So is hypnosis something that's going to help possibly get these people off of those medications, or is it something that's used kind of in tandem with the medications that they're already on?
You have to work with a doctor with medications, because getting somebody off something, is dangerous territory. But people do get relief, and you can start lowering your medications, and don't do it by yourself.
No, right.
But I've found that first off, with pain management, you can get to people. Some people, the pain completely goes away. I had somebody get over sciatica in one session, and neuropathy as well in the next session. So, and I talked to her years later, and they were still gone. So you can do those things. And like I had an anger management client that I was working with. And when we did that piece of work, he said, "Oh my God, my back. My back pain that I've been carrying around for the last 3 years is completely gone." We didn't even do anything. We didn't do any pain management work at all. We just did the work that was important to do.
Interesting. So,
Yeah.
so does it help the source of the pain go away, or is it just reframing how they think about the pain and what's going on in their minds? Like, how does that work?
Sometimes it seems like magic, and I have absolutely no idea what's going on. So with this woman with neuropathy, she and she we got over that. We did almost all of the sciatica in 10 minutes, and I was like, wow, what are we going to do with the rest of the session? That's pretty fast. And then we did the neuropathy, and like, you use visual images a lot of the time, and she was coming up with things that like made absolutely no sense because it was her feet, and these were way bigger than her feet. But then I said, hey, why don't she used the green light bulb. You know, the green light bulb they use for veterans to honor veterans
Yes.
somehow?
Yes.
That's what she was using. And so she had turned off a green light bulb for her sciatica. I said, well, let's do the green light bulb, but imagine 2 green light bulbs in your feet, but turn them on. And as soon as she turned them on, so being an empath, my feet and legs started tingling. It was just the weirdest thing. And she'd been a stop smoking client the week before. And I was an intern at the time. And I was in this, and the room I had picked was the lowest, 3 flights down. She said, can you pick a better room next time? Because this is hard for me. And I unfortunately, I couldn't get that other room. So she came down the stairs. And after the neuropathy was gone, I saw her walk the stairs like she would do an entire flight of stairs at a time, whereas last time it was 2 steps at a time. It was like the most miraculous thing. So sometimes I don't know. Sometimes we have techniques that work during the session, and just when pain shows up, you kind of do the technique. Sometimes it's simple as imagining a control room where you lower the control for pain. And some of it also has to do with emotional things, because with pain management clients, I'll ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, how much pain are you in right now? And they'll say a 5. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how upset are you about the pain that you're having right now? Oh, that's a 7. So if you get them to lower the emotional level of their upset, that's part of it. There's all these different techniques. And then, I had a cancer patient who, after her surgery, had all kinds of things going on. And there was just this thing that she felt so guilty about that was actually causing the pain, something from her childhood when she was 4 years old, with a dog that wound up drowning while she was watching the dog. And she was 4 years old, but children think they're responsible for everything. And that stopped her pain. Healing that stopped her pain.
Interesting. So it sounds to me it's a lot of kind of just reframing your thought process on how that pain is affecting you. Where in your mind, if you were to slam your hand in the door, like, you're going to get that initial pain, but then you might be kind of more mad at yourself for not being more careful or something, and it may almost seems like it might make that pain even more. Is that kind of how that works?
The mind and the body are super connected, and hypnosis, the MRIs they did at Stanford in 2016 really showed that the connection between the mind and the body amplifies during hypnosis. I don't understand the science of the MRIs, but I understand their conclusions. We definitely work more with chronic pain than acute pain, because pain is a signal your body is sending to keep you safe. It doesn't want you to do the same thing again and again, or hurt yourself in a certain kind of way. But at a certain point, you don't need that signal anymore. You're not at risk, but your body has these pathways. Your mind, nervous system has these pathways that keep it going. So it's more along those lines, but also, the non-psychological side is if you notice some pain, and let's say it's at a 5, and I'll ask you to, what color, what shape, what does it look like, or what does it sound like, whatever. And then I'll say, before it was a 5, it was a 4. What was it like as a 4? And then you'll come up with something else. And then we'll have you shift the 5, the object of the 5. Let's say this is dumb because it's like a candy cane at 5.
Okay.
And at 4, this is not at all accurate, but it's what I can think of at the moment. And it's candy corn at 4.
Okay.
So, and then, at 3, it's something else. And slowly but surely we take you down. My biggest problem with pain management clients is some of them get their pain at really bad times where it's hard to have an appointment. And so it's hard to do pain management with somebody who's not in pain.
Right. Now, is that something that they can learn how to walk that pain back on their own? So like going through a few sessions, they can start to learn how to do this when it comes up on their own, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It helps to have the actual pain to work with, though.
Sure.
You have no proof otherwise, right? It's like, oh, here's what you're going to do, and this is going to work, but you don't believe it's going to work for sure until you've experienced it yourself.
Sure. And when someone approaches you with whatever it is, it's physical, emotional, whatever it is, whatever the issue is that they're going through, how does that initial kind of intake look like when they come to you? And what is it that you're looking for to see, is this even a good fit for them, or would you be able to help them? What does that first initial touch look like?
Well, the initial touch is, what are you looking for? What's going on? Why are you looking for hypnosis? And I will ask them if they read novels. That's a question I like to ask. Have you ever? You don't have to read them now, but when you read novels, did this happen? Or when you go to the movies, do you ever feel sad when something bad happens to the character? That's kind of at least something's gonna work,
Mm-hmm.
And even when that doesn't work, I had a client. He didn't actually turn into a client, but he was having what's that thing when they move blood in and out of you, and they dialysis.
Dialysis, yeah.
On his days that he itched from dialysis, and this was one of his non-itchy days. And because we were talking about the itching all the time, he didn't have anything. The movie question, nope, don't care about the characters. Never lost his concentration enough to go miss his house on the way home. He never, he didn't read novels and see pictures. But he said, this is so weird. I don't know why I'm itching on this day. Because we were talking about all these itches, and he was suggestible in that way. So, okay. And I think we all are pretty suggestible. I have a quiz that at my anxiety123.com site where you discover how hypnotizable you are. And one of the questions is, if you scan your body right now, can you feel an itch? And pretty much everybody answers yes to that question. It's a horrible thing to do to myself, because I was searching for pictures to go with that, and I could not stop scratching the whole time I was looking for pictures. It was like, this is horrible. And I feel a little bad that I asked people that question, but it really works to know that. But so I'll ask that question, and you'll get a sense of where they're coming from and how open they are to things, and that's really important. And sometimes they'll mention they have trauma or whatever. There's something that gets kind of personal, and my real go-to is that I notice the empath thing. I'll notice tension in my body from the conversation that belongs to them, and usually that's a pretty good sign that it's going to work.
Okay, interesting.
So, but that's not. I mean, if you're going to another hypnotist, that's not necessarily ever going to happen. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of empathic hypnotists, but it's not necessarily how people judge it.
Sure. And what is it like when you're in that trance, when you're undergoing the hypnosis?
For the other person or for me?
For the other person, like for the person who's coming to you to be hypnotized.
It's super relaxed.
Okay.
It's just a very, very relaxed state. And so like, and it's an aware state where you're aware of tension. And so it's not like you're in this deep trance where you're not going to remember anything. You're not going to remember everything, like an hour-long session. I'm not going to remember everything that we've said already, and it hasn't been
Sure.
an hour. But on the other hand, generally people remember stuff. It's not like you're in this deep, out of it state where you don't know what's going on.
Okay.
It's more like it's maybe like a lucid dream. I think maybe I had one lucid dream in my life, but it's just you're in touch with yourself. You know things more. You just get, and for me, it's I'm taking people in through their body, so it's like you just get answers. It's so crazy. I've had people come up with complete understanding of what was going on in their parents' minds, what that they never knew. I had a 70-something-year-old man who, well, now is probably around 80 because it's a while back. And he came home at 3 years old, and his mom came home, and came home on a gurney, and no one would tell him what was going on. And they dragged her up to her bedroom, and he was terrified by it. He had no idea what was happening. Well, she had an abortion,
Oh,
and that's why nobody said anything. He was 3 years old, and it just terrified him for his whole life. This had bothered him. But suddenly he knew, and he didn't know it before the hypnosis session. He was like, oh my God, she had an abortion. That's what that was. And that happens time and again. People understand motivation, why the mother didn't leave the insane father, and all kinds of things like that show up in hypnosis. You just know things, and you're aware of things in a very different kind of state. You're more connected to your subconscious mind. You're more connected to kind of the soup that we all live in somehow.
yeah, and it sounds like we already know all of this stuff already. It's already somewhere in our mind. It's just you need to find it, and you need to unlock that and get that stuff out, right?
Yeah, and what you really need to do is get rid of the leftover tension in your body that you're carrying, and get rid of the beliefs that the experience caused you, not intellectually, because it doesn't work that way. So I have two sentences I have people say almost all the time. The first sentence is blank. It really hurt me when you blank. Dad, it really hurt me when you criticized me all the time. Or blank, screw you blank. I actually use a different word, but screw you blank, you don't get to blank. So, screw you, Dad, you don't get to push me around, or whoever it was. And what's really interesting is I have them say this to the mom or dad in their mind. And the mom or dad will make excuses. This is all going on in their head, right? Mm-hmm. But that mom or that dad makes an excuse. Oh, I'm sorry. They may say, I'm sorry, but it seems very not genuine. Or I'm sorry, that's how I was raised. Or, I'm sorry, but I was trying to make things better for you. So then we take another step. And the next step is we turn mom or dad into a 5-year-old. And we picture them as a 5-year-old. It doesn't matter whether you have an accurate idea or not of what they look like as a 5-year-old, but you just say the same thing, and then they respond somewhat differently. But sometimes they're still kind of not willing to give in. But then you can ask them, why were you that way? Why did you do that to me? And invariably, it's because they wanted a parent of theirs to love them. Like if we're a perfectionist because we wanted a parent to love us, and they wouldn't love us unless we were perfect. And so then we talk to the 5-year-old parent, and it always, with perfectionism, it's always that one of their parents wasn't going to love them if their kid wasn't perfect in their mind. And so that's kind of the chain of things. And what happens a lot of the time is we get that parent to give them a ball of light and put it in their chest. And it's very strange because, I mean, this came to me through working with people over time, that there was a way to do this. And so they put the ball of light into that, the grandparent puts the ball of light into the parent's chest. And invariably, you notice, the client notices that there's a sensation there. They feel it. They notice the parent feeling it and changing it. And we have them put the light all the way through their body. And then a lot of the time, you can say, Mom, you really hurt me when you criticize me all the time. And this version of your mom says, I'm sorry, you're a great kid. I love you. I never should have done that. Most of the time. Sometimes the parent was so intense that you just can't even imagine that, even after they've had the ball of light. So then we bring in the understudy. And so we take either someone you know and love and have them play your mother, or someone who's passed on, or a spiritual figure, or a historical figure, or a character from a book, a TV show, a movie, or a comic book, or a celebrity. I just had somebody work with Tom Hanks as their father, and that was great, right? And not a QAnon person, because they have all kinds of weird things about Tom Hanks. But and I usually have Tom Hanks hold the father's hand as and it kind of seeps through to the parent, to the actual parent. But this is an internalized parent. Your parent could be dead, and you're still doing this, and you're still carrying this parent around that doesn't love you unconditionally.
So getting that worked out in your mind, and basically seeing and feeling it work through, you kind of just reframed the old experience that you've been hanging on to for so long, and helps you to move on from that, right?
You move on, and all kinds of things change. I had a client who had a fear of being touched. Not just like his wife, he couldn't be hugged by his wife. He would count to 10. And that as a way of letting his wife touch him longer, not during sex, but it was like affection things. And we did this work, and I approached it slightly differently. I just, where does she touch you that you start feeling scared? And it was like his shoulders. I said, well, let's just imagine your shoulders turning into atoms, and let's see what happens. What's inside your shoulders? And he said, a knife. And I said, who's the knife belong to? And it was his dad. And it was this really strong sense that his dad, trusting his dad, he always felt like his dad was stabbing him in the back. And literally in half an hour, he was over that. After 20 years of marriage, his wife was like, why didn't you go see Mahesh sooner? 20 years before I was not a hypnotist, so, and I didn't know how to do these things. But this is a longstanding client, and it has never gone back. He's never had that fear of touch anymore. It was lovely. It changed his life. There's actually a video of this in the Defy Trauma course, because I like people to be able to learn my system, but also to see how it works, because there is a slightly improvisatory thing going on. There's an art as well as a science, even though I don't know why it works scientifically.
Right.
It's very precise.
Well, so you mentioned your course, a Defy Trauma course, and I want to give you a chance to let people know where they can find this course, the 1 minute anxiety solution, your website, everything that you have, where people can go to contact you and get in touch if they want to find out more about what it is that you do and how they can work with you.
So I want to make it as easy as 1, 2, 3. So I created a site called anxiety123.com, and that includes all my links. So there's a quiz for how hypnotizable you are, especially specifically around anxiety. There's a link to my 1 minute anxiety ebook and a 1 quick win over anxiety video series that comes with it. And there's the link to the Defy Trauma course. There's all my social media stuff. And if you want to try to set up a free half-hour consultation with me because you're interested in working directly with me, there's a link to that as well. Again, it's anxiety123.com. As easy as 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, and that's nice and easy to remember, anxiety123.com. But for anyone who might be in the car or someplace where you can't write it down, if you don't feel like you can remember it, you can check out the show notes. You can go back to this episode and click through there as well. I'll have links to everything in the show notes, so you can grab that as well. But anxiety123.com, I don't think it gets too much easier than that. So try to remember that if you can. So it's been a pleasure having you on. Really great chatting with you and getting to learn a little bit more about hypnosis and how that works. It kind of opened up my eyes to some things that I didn't really understand going into this episode. Helped me to kind of clarify really what it is that hypnosis really entails. So I'm glad to have you here, and hopefully this helps some other people who might be interested in learning about these different techniques to manage their pain, whether it's physical or emotional, other things that they may be going through. So thanks again.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks for listening to the Drive On Podcast. If you want to check out more episodes or learn more about the show, you can visit our website, driveonpodcast.com. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Drive On Podcast.